It's episode 68 of the Improv London podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Moses, and this week's guest is Lizzy Mace.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Hooray.
Very pleased to be here.
I'm very pleased that you are here. Perhaps we should start with an ending.
Yeah.
Two of Wands has recently come to its conclusion.
Yes.
Please tell me all about it.
Yes. It was very recently. We had our last gig last Monday at Duck Duck Goose, which was great fun. I always love playing there. It's such a friendly night. It's lovely. And we've, as Two of Wands, we've performed there a lot as well since we started up last April. But yeah, it just comes to the point where we both felt that we'd got what we wanted to out of the team. It really started as an experiment to see how we could play with people's expectations of what improv is supposed to be or what it usually is. And we felt like we'd kind of, proved what we wanted to prove in the experiment and learned what we wanted to learn. So it felt like a good time to draw a line under it, really. So yeah,
we should mention your partner in crime, Michael Such, star of episode 3 of the Improv London podcast. Do have a listen if you haven't listened to that one already. And he has a background in live action role playing and kind of story gaming and that sort of thing, and I think that must have had an influence on the style of performance that
absolutely. Michael's really great at coming up with new interesting concepts. He also directed me in Open Roads, the improvised road movie, which we did at the nursery as part of the originals program. He also writes LARP games as well as being involved in them, so he's got a really good kind of grasp of interesting concepts and structures for this kind of work. And the Two of Wands format was really mostly his idea. He kind of came to me with the concept and we workshopped a little bit, but mostly it was his concept that he'd come up with. And it was just really fun working in that way. And kind of, so some of the things we did to kind of usurp what you would expect from improv is, for example, rather than coming on and saying, hello, we are blah, 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 can we have a suggestion? We would often always come on in character already. So that was one of the sort of things that we did. We'd come on in character, and sometimes we'd come on before they'd stopped introducing us. So we'd come on halfway through what they were saying, and they'd have to just kind of deal with that.
I love that.
And we would always leave in character as well. So we would take our bow and give our kind of, plugs and things in whatever character we were at when the blackout came, and then leave kind of still interacting with each other in character. So that was one of the things we did that was kind of, just playing with what people might expect to see in improv.
And you would sometimes seemingly spontaneously break out into poetry. Was it really spontaneous?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Actually, it's the poetry that most people asked us afterwards, had you prepared that? And no, it was all completely made up on the spot. Yeah. I mean, the kind of a lot of the inspiration for the format came from aspects of modernism. And I think I'm allowed to reveal now because we're not doing it anymore, particularly T.S. Eliot's poem The Wasteland.
Oh, right.
And so this kind of fragmented, disjointed aesthetic, so without a clear narrative and kind of, jumping around in time and playing with form. So, we had a set of ritual phrases that we would say to each other throughout the show, that would end whatever scene we were in and would introduce the way that we then found what the next scene was. So again, that's another way of playing with what's expected, because we never did any sweep transitions or tags or even organic transitions. We didn't do any of that. We just had these transitions that were made up from these ritual phrases. It was all completely experimental and was really fun. And like I said, I feel like we did show, because we were just interested whether it would be kind of accepted by an audience who might have particular expectations, and it really was. It was accepted and embraced by them. So we kind of felt like we've sort of done a little experiment in what we can do differently. It was great fun to be involved in.
Yes, I saw a couple of the shorter shows that you did, and I just never knew that you were using those kind of phrases. I never picked up on that. I just thought, wow, they're just really connected. They just know when they're going to go into this next thing.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things? I don't necessarily want to know the phrases that you used, but what would you signal that you were going to? What would you want to signal to Michael? What could you signal?
So originally they were sort of intended as a diagnostic tool. So if we felt that, for example, we were in a scene where we weren't very emotionally connected, then we would say a particular phrase which would introduce a game that we would play that would help us get more connected, and then through that game we would find the start of the next scene. So that was the way it was intended, but we actually just ended up using them really just as ways to edit the scene and start the next one. It's quite difficult to if you're in the scene, to notice what it is you feel is missing and then to remember the phrase that you need to use.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it ended up more just being whatever phrase comes out of my mouth at this moment is the phrase that we're going to use now. But yeah, no, it was great. So, yeah, so that would be one of them would be, emotional connection. One of them would be sort of, are we physically using the space or doing object work or that kind of thing? So there'd be another phrase that would help us find a more physical thing to do. So I'm feeling all the secrets now that the experiment is over.
Well, I always felt that there was a plan. It's like when I watch a TV programme, I don't necessarily want to know what the plan is, but I want to know that the makers of the TV programme know what they're doing. And I don't need to see all the working, but I need to know the working is there. And I always felt the working was there, and now I know a little bit about what the working is.
Yeah.
You were coached by Katie Shute before you...
Yeah, we did a couple of longer, like you said, we mostly were performing around London, sort of 10, 15-minute gigs. But we did this year do a couple of longer ones as well. We did 45 minutes at Improv Amsterdam in January, and also at the Improv Fest UK at the Tristan Bates Theatre. We did a whole hour there. So before we did those, we got some coaching from Katie Shute, and she also helped us kind of find new things to do. So you mentioned the poetry one that we did. Originally, it would be that one of us would stand at the front and deliver some improvised poetry, and the other would just be waiting at the back until they were inspired by a line that would start the next scene. But Katie suggested that we, instead of that, actually the person, rather than standing at the back, they actually do, they sort of improvise a movement, like a physical theatre thing that relates to what the poetry was. So that added a whole new dimension to it, which again, was great. And something that, most groups probably wouldn't sort of dare to do in an improv stage. So yeah, it was great.
I always enjoyed doing the tech for you the couple of times I did it, because there was always a moment, or both times I did it, it was like, we have a song, please. At one point there was a marriage, and at one point there were, it was just amazing. I just remember some of Michael's dancing. Will linger long in my mind.
Yeah, I guess that's another way we sort of played with what's expected, one of the things, for example, rather than getting a suggestion from the audience at the start, is one of the phrases we had would introduce interaction. So we would know that if one of us said that phrase, we would know that they're about to go and talk to the audience. But we would always do it in character. And usually we'd like it to be kind of at a pivotal moment. So we would ask the audience a really important question, and then what they give back would influence what happens in the scene. Yeah. So we were kind of using you, I guess, in a way like an audience member in that. So we're knowing that we could ask you for some music, and that whatever it was would influence what happens. But again, it's just that way of kind of expanding what people might think can be done with improv, even in a 10 or 15 minute gig. There's a lot you can play with in that.
It always felt this could go anywhere. But that was very exciting, and I always felt that you were both in control, and it wasn't just completely random. I might not understand the pattern or the meaning, but I sort of always felt there was a pattern or a meaning there, which I think is a difficult one to balance. Yeah,
one thing we did aim to do is to have variety in each gig as well. So, if we could have a really dramatic scene alongside a really stupid funny one, then that would be like the ideal. We love to play with those different tones within the same gig. and also a variety of characters and a variety of relationships. Just trying to keep it mixed up. But I think, it still does have a certain kind of feel overall that's sort of otherworldly, and like you don't know where it's going to go. And actually the blurb that we always give is, what if a dream stepped out of your head and onto stage? And that's kind of the feel that we wanted it to have. Again, it goes along with the modernism and the sort of fragmentary aesthetic. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad that I got to see you perform as two at once, because it was always oh, brilliant. Who knows what's going to happen, but I know I'm going to enjoy it. And I know there's going to be amazing things happening.
It did sometimes go into dark places. There was one where I got murdered on stage. That was cool. But it also did go to really weird, fun places as well. There was one where we were just two robots having a kind of love triangle with a vending machine. But always trying to play it with this kind of emotional truthfulness that it matters to the characters.
Yes.
You know, that's really important to me, and I think that runs through in the other teams that I'm in as well. Is this emotional truth?
Yes,
it's very important.
And what sort of reaction were you trying to get from the audience, or were you even thinking about that?
I don't think we were aiming for any particular reaction. I suppose it is that feeling of, not really knowing what's going to happen next. Yeah. Keep people sort of on the edge of their seats a little bit.
Yes, no, I definitely, not least for the fact you often left the stage and then would be performing in darkness, which I loved. And it's I can't see them now, but the scene's still going on, and then my mind's working to fill in the blanks. And, I loved it. Yeah.
And we also, sometimes with our interaction with the audience, it wouldn't always be going to one person and addressing them as though they're a character. We would sometimes address the whole audience as though they're all characters. There was one where we were teachers who had to tell the class that they weren't going to go on a school trip, and it then became about the teachers actually, their relationship ending and involving the class in terms of who's your favourite teacher, all this kind of stuff. It was really cute and really heartbreaking.
That does sound hilarious.
And sometimes one of us would just completely leave the room and leave the other one on stage. And that actually happened in that scene. So Michael was voted as being the least popular teacher, and he left the room. And so then I carried on in character, giving a sex education class. And obviously that was heartbreaking because they just broken up. So we just love using whatever happens. Oh, speaking of using whatever happens, there was one gig that we did where Michael's trousers split in the middle of it.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he just had to sit on the stage, and he actually just said to me, "This is very embarrassing. My trousers have just split." So that was the start of the next scene, and we discovered that we worked in this company and we had to fire somebody. So obviously we were firing a member of the audience. So I was like, "Oh, well, you were going to go and do it in their office, but seeing as your trousers are split, I'll go and bring them in here." So then I went and got someone from the audience, and we had this whole scene where we were firing this person, but Michael couldn't move from his chair.
So did you know that it really had split his trousers?
Oh yeah, I heard that. I heard them go. I think everyone in the room heard them go. So there was no way we could just ignore it. We had to use it,
Yes, because you dressed up.
Yeah, we had little costumes, in these kind of... we wanted it to feel kind of timeless, but also as though it could be a kind of modern world, but slightly askew.
Yes.
So, we both just wore kind of suits, really, with waistcoats and ties, and smart shoes. We kind of... I think that helped with the feel of it being a little bit different and a little bit odd.
Yes, it was strangely off this world and also otherworldly. Yeah, so it was a great look.
Yeah.
I do like it when a group have thought through what they're doing enough so that it extends to what they're wearing as well. It just makes me think, okay, these are people that have obviously thought about what they're doing, and their clothing is a sort of a logical extension of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. But you're also in Big Now.
Big Now.
I need you to explain Big Now to me.
I don't know if I can explain Big Now.
Please explain the Big Now to me. Who's in Big Now? What's the... let's set up the who, what, where.
Start with the who, what, where. Okay. Who? It's myself. I hate it when people say it's myself. I just said it. It's myself.
It's
Sophie Pumphrey and Arfi. I don't think he likes giving his surname.
No.
Arfi Mononym.
Yes, if that is his real name.
Yes.
Which it is.
So it's the three of us. And we do a kind of bonkers, physical, quite clowny, sometimes quite grotesque kind of thing. I think the main thing that's unique about us is that, again, it's about the transitions. So we do scenes, but we also have these really big physical transitions that happen in between the scenes. And sometimes we might spend as much time in the transition as we do in the scene. So the transitions become something with the life of their own. And yeah, so we're kind of blurring that boundary between what is a scene and what is between the scenes. Kind of trying to inhabit everything that happens on the stage. So that's as far as I can explain it, I think. And yeah, it is a bit, again, it's unusual. We're not really doing what a lot of other groups would do. It's very clowny. We do interact with the audience sometimes, but in a very stupid, silly way. Not to get kind of input from them, but just to kind of, just to play with them, really. I think it's something that is to be experienced rather than explained.
So you say it's a bit clowny. How do you define clown? In the Big Now context.
In the Big Now context, very more.
Yes. How very big now.
Yes, it's very big now. Very physical. Yes. I think I would say we use the physicality of the transitions to find the next scene. So we're always surprising ourselves because the scenes we do, you would never come up with. It just depends. Like we do what our bodies want us to do, and then we find where we are. So yeah, I suppose the physicality of it is one thing, and I think also the willingness to just to look stupid. Like sometimes we will just be standing on stage making fart noises and we'll just do that for as long as we want to do that until it's not fun anymore, and then it'll turn into something else. And it's very hard to describe.
It is. How important is it to Big Now that the audience enjoys it? Okay, so let me clarify. Enjoys. It may be possible to draw pleasure from watching a show while simultaneously being annoyed.
Yeah.
Is that what you're aiming at?
I'm
not the same.
I'm not really sure. What are we aiming at for the audience? I think we just want people to be a bit surprised.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah?
Yeah, probably like, oh, I didn't know you could do that on stage. But it was kind of fun to watch.
Right.
I guess that's what we're doing. Yeah. In what sense annoyed?
Well, I'm just thinking that there are some groups you watch, and it's like, it's all kind of like, we're all having fun, and then there's some groups you watch and go, is this art? Am I supposed to enjoy this, or am I supposed to sort of marvel at it? Do you know what I mean? There's like, how much responsibility does an improv group have to ensure the audience enjoy themselves? Or
I think, like you say, because it is an art form, and so I think if you as a group are clear what you want to be doing, then in some ways, is it our responsibility how the audience responds to that?
Yeah.
And we're never gonna, with art, you're never gonna please everybody.
Yeah.
So if you go in trying to please everybody, you're not actually gonna be creating art, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Did that answer the question?
Well, I've seen Big Now a few times.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, and this is just my interpretation, that there's sort of an agenda. I'm not quite sure what the agenda is.
You're very suspicious.
Maybe I am.
Yeah.
Maybe I am.
You want to know if there's a plan or an agenda.
Yes, I want to understand the workings behind it, because I'm kind of extrapolating that you are there. I think you are there to provoke the audience.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way of putting it. Yeah. I think when I said we'd like them to be surprised, that's probably the same kind of thing. Yeah. For us in Big Now at the moment particularly, we're really focused on our own process, and we're still experimenting with that, and a lot of it is to do with this. How do you go between being this very out there kind of clownish, like jesting with the audience, kind of poking them a bit? How do you go from that very out there kind of energy into the scenes which we would like to be more connected to each other and a bit more closed off from the audience, so that it's like you're glimpsing a real thing happening.
Yes.
And and at the moment we're really figuring out and practicing how do you go between those two states of performance.
That's really interesting.
And can it work?
Yes.
And if we're aiming for everyone to enjoy it, then maybe it doesn't work. But if we're not aiming for everyone to enjoy it, and we're aiming to experiment and hone our own kind of skills in those areas, then maybe it does work.
Yes. I think that's kind of what I'm driving at, as in that you are seeking to experiment, and I think you are succeeding in doing that. Because I think it's challenging, and I'm not. That's in no way a criticism. I think it's the things you do, and I think deliberately, are challenging for the audience.
Maybe. I don't know. There has been several gigs where we've ended up sucking each other's fingers, and it hasn't been like we've deliberately decided, this is a thing we're going to do. It has just been what's come about, and I suppose that is a little bit kind of related to. We've all trained with Dave Rosowski when he's been over here, and we love his thing of a scene being a balloon blowing up, and if you can notice where the point of tension is and play with that.
Yes.
And sometimes that is going to be, the point of tension is going to be discomfort, and it's going to be, how do you make things more uncomfortable?
Yes.
From the point that you start at, how do you grow that tension and that discomfort? So sometimes it is going to be something that's uncomfortable, and it might be us ending up sucking each other's fingers on stage, and that has happened more than once. So I guess that is what we're playing with, and we're learning how to do, and how it fits in with the rest of what we're aiming at. Yeah.
So, how often do you rehearse?
It varies. We're at the moment trying to meet every 2 weeks. And yeah, we work on different aspects in each rehearsal, and we get different coaches in as well. So sometimes we've worked on the clowning aspect, and sometimes we've worked on the scene aspect. Yeah, but because we're trying to do something really different, it's quite difficult to find coaches that kind of
Yes.
get that and can kind of really help us to find what we're trying to find. So yeah, it's the whole thing is still very much a work in progress. But I think that's what's exciting about a lot of the stuff that's happening in London is teams are kind of finding what they do best, and you never, when you see an improv gig, I hope you're not seeing something where the people in it feel, oh, that's it, we're doing everything as best as we possibly can, we can't go any further than this.
Yeah.
I hope that you're always seeing people who are engaged with what they're doing,
yes.
and trying to tweak it and trying to improve it and aiming for something exciting.
Yeah.
So you're always seeing a work in progress.
Yes.
Ideally. And so that's what we are.
I mean, I would much rather see a group that were aiming for something, not reaching that, but at least they're really aiming high for something that's, challenging, interesting, or just different.
Yeah.
I mean, I have thought about that, and so if you're trying to grow a group that is unlike any other group in London, which I would say Big Now are, although that some crossover with somewhat theatre, but we'll come to that in a minute.
Yeah.
How do you get a coach in? So a coach from the improv scene that might teach you how to do good improv, but is it good Big Now? Yeah,
this is what we're struggling with a bit, and we've actually brought a coach in who doesn't do improv but is an actor, and he works particularly with viewpoints, which again is something that Dave Rosowski introduced us to. So working with him really did help with the kind of the playfulness of the physicality.
Yes.
Which is a big thing that we want to explore more of. And we've also approached a couple of clowns to coach us as well. So we're kind of bringing in people from different theatre disciplines, rather than just pure improv.
I'd not heard that before, but I love that idea, and I think that's really interesting, and I think that's going to make you stand out, as opposed to, much as I love the improv scene, it's like, okay, so there's quite sort of standard things, and I've seen groups who've started out and they've had something individual. They've maybe not been so technically proficient, but they've had their own individual identity, and then they've had some coaching, and I think, okay, you're now more technically proficient, but I know those moves, I understand where you learnt them from, and I just kind of think it's a shame that in that becoming more proficient we lost that originality.
That sort of rawness and the real joy and playfulness of not having a clue what's happening.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, whenever I step off after a Big Now gig, I'm like, I didn't know what was happening there. And that's kind of, I mean, when you start doing improv, that's kind of that's the experience you're hoping to have, is not knowing. And like you say, the more you kind of learn tricks or techniques, the less you find yourself in that state of like free fall, where you're like, I just have to react in the moment now, because there's nothing I can fall back on.
But somehow you can't stay in that free fall. Can you stay in that free? I don't know, in that sort of naive, but in a good way state. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know if you can.
Well, I mean, that's sort of what the physical transitions help us to do. Is, we can only surprise ourselves when we're just letting our bodies lead us, and get out of our heads completely. You can't possibly plan what's going to happen in a Big Now gig. You can't be like planning ahead and think, oh, I'm going to do a scene where I'm a spider on a web. You can't possibly plan.
One of my favourite transitions you did was at the new nursery theatre, where you discovered that there's behind the curtain there is actually a gap. and you were sort of all holding on to the pillar and going big now.
Yeah.
And it was just, I don't know, it was just like, and I thought, oh, do you know what? I didn't realise there was a gap behind that curtain. I was just, that in no way felt planned. It was just like, okay, there's a thing here, we're going to comment on it.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the bit when you're interacting with the audience, and then
Yeah.
you eventually transition into a more scene-based thing. But,
Exactly. Yeah. Sort of. Again, it's that the change of energy from where we're talking to the audience and playing with the audience and kind of being really physical and provocative, and also commenting on the actual real reality of where we are, and then going from that into a scene which is a different reality, and that's the kind of that for the benefit of the tape, I'm making a sort of concertina shape with my hands to indicate the opening out of the energy and then the closing back in of the energy. And it is that, also the jumping between this is real reality that we're sitting in a room which is a theatre which has a stage, and then closing off again and creating a new reality.
Yes.
And it is very difficult to navigate that, and we're still, like I said, we're still finding out how best to do that and what happens when we do that. Yeah.
Fantastic. I feel I understand a little bit more. I don't know if it's every. I just sometimes feel I need things explaining. Which is why I do this podcast. You're also involved in Somewhat Theatre.
Yeah.
And there's somewhat of a crossover with Big Now, maybe?
Yeah, there is, yeah. Well, Alfie Monomin. Arfie, let's just call him Arfie.
He's like Beyonce, he doesn't need a surname.
One of the members of Big Now wanted to set up another group that was, somewhat theatrical, that was sort of using, again, some of the techniques that we've learnt from Dave Rosowski about finding the tension and being emotionally truthful, and using our physical, having an awareness of what our bodies are doing and using that as inspiration.
Right.
Having an awareness of our emotions and being truthful about those to create the scene. And then noticing the point of tension and blowing up that balloon. So Arfie wanted to set up a group of people who have trained with Dave to work in that way, but without the extra thing that we have in Big Now, which is the clowny stuff.
Ah, interesting. Right,
so Arfie pulled together this, what I think of as a dream team. I love performing with all the people in it. They're all awesome. They're all people who've done the week-long training with Dave, either last year or this year. Or both. Some people have done both.
So who's the dream team in Somewhat Theatre?
So we've got Roderick Miller. We've got Trilly Chatterjee. Is he Trilly Chatterjee?
Yes.
Yes, Trilly Chatterjee.
I don't know. I've just trained as an improviser to go yes.
We've got Joelle Huck. Again, Sophie Pumphrey. We did have a couple of the people who've sadly had to drop out, but we do now have new members to replace them. So we've got Jennifer Jordan, Julia Eckhoff, who's just moved here from Germany.
Cool.
And
sorry, I realised that was more of a testing question than I really meant it to be in retrospect.
Like Kim's game where you have all those things under a tea towel. Who is the third person we've just asked to join? Audrey Davenport. Yes.
Lovely. Yeah. Good choice.
And I'm panicking in my head. I'm like, have I missed someone out?
If you have, tell me and I will edit it in. Because I'll edit me go, and the such and such.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah,
so now you have my pre-recording.
Exactly. That's interesting. So, yes, because I was... Yeah, because I've seen Big Now and I've seen Somewhat Theatre, and I was like, okay, I'm not quite sure, but you're right, it is. It's the clowning is in Big Now and those kind of transitions, whereas, Somewhat Theatre are more,
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have finished that sentence, I realised. They're just more.
Yeah. I mean, the idea behind it, from Alfie's point of view, was to do something more theatrical and grounded. Yeah, and that's where the name came from. I mean, originally we were meeting at a point, I think. We had 3 different names in our first 3 gigs.
Okay, right.
So for one gig we were meeting at a point, and I think in the next gig we were something theatre, and then we settled on somewhat theatre.
Right,
and that feels like that's what it is. Yeah. But again, we're still sort of, discovering what we are as well. We've had quite a few gigs, but yeah, we're still discovering what we do best as a team. They quite often end up feeling sort of slightly absurdist. We've had people say they're like Ionesco-esque or a little bit Beckett-like.
Yes. Yes, I can see that.
It's got that kind of that sort of patient. Nothing needs to happen.
Yes.
Sort of feel to it, and sometimes quite existential.
Yes.
We had a fun gig that was just me, Joelle, and Arfie. I can't remember if you were there. It was at Hoopla.
The one about the cinema.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
very
fun.
enjoyable.
Yeah.
Perhaps explain it for those that weren't there.
Well, we just moved our chairs into a position, and we used that to inspire what happens. And it was me and Arfie sitting next to each other, and Joelle sitting opposite us, but in the dark, because there's a dark patch on that stage. And we just had a conversation, and through the course of the conversation, we discovered that we were at a cinema, and we were talking to Joelle as though he was either the film or a trailer, and we were trying to help him discover what he was. And in relation to, well, I don't feel like I'm a film. Maybe I'm a trailer, but we don't normally come and watch the trailers, and we're watching you, so you mustn't be a trailer. So it was all this kind of, existential.
Yes.
Kind of oddness.
It was yes. Existential oddness is a very good description. It was interesting because you and Arfie played quite pedantic characters. You were all very picky about the detail, and that thing about, well, we don't normally come and see the trailer, so you can't be a trailer.
Yeah.
And then Joelle played it a lot. I don't know if his energy was slower or something like that, but it was a really nice combination because you two were just like,
yeah.
Excuse me. So,
that's exactly what we sound like.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. But it's playing those sort of characters, and then he was like, well, as you say, I don't know if I am a film.
Yeah.
So it was really nice how the way the stage had been arranged, and it just I'm giving you the thumbs up now, which obviously you can see, but you can't see that on the audio medium.
For the benefit of the tape.
Yes. So is that how you speak to? Is that how you communicate with Arfie? Then is it pedantic manner? Or is that just on the stage?
I don't know. That came out in that gig. I don't know if it comes out in others. I suppose sometimes it does. I mean, Arfie's very intellectual, and so we can sometimes end up having kind of intellectual games. But yeah, we're also aiming to have emotional games as well, and get both of those levels sort of playing off each other.
I mean, it's lovely to have both of those things to go to, and have the intellectual kind of the clever wordplay sort of thing, and then have the emotional stuff as well.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to do both. And do you regularly rehearse with somewhat theatre, or?
They're a bit more irregular at the moment because we have just had this changeover of members. So we'll obviously need to sit down at some point and figure out when we're next meeting. They tend to be monthly,
right?
Because there's more of us, so it's a bit harder to get everyone together.
I mean, the whole rehearsal thing is the hardest
thing
about it. The organising of getting everybody, especially if you're in various groups.
Yeah.
I wish I had a solution to offer, but I don't.
People just need to be less busy.
Yes.
They need to not have lives outside of improv. They must not have social lives or families.
Yeah, brilliant and fantastic. And I've written a list. I mean, obviously, Lizzy can see this because I don't normally write a list, but Lizzie's involved in many, many things, and I didn't want to forget.
Yes.
I didn't want to forget
For
any
the benefit
of them.
of the tape, there is a list
There's
on
a
the
list.
table.
I will tick off the ones we have discussed. I've written down the clique,
Yeah.
spelt CLEEK.
Yeah.
What was that?
That was, again, it was another experiment. Is that... Only through talking to you, I'm realising how experimental my work has been.
There's been a thread through all of these, every single one of these groups that you are in. They're all different.
I
but
don't
all
like
the
to
same.
do things how other people do them.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So yeah, the clique was an experiment that came out of when I did the summer intensives at Second City in Chicago.
How did you find that?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I did both improv and sketch writing. So it was improv every morning and sketch writing every afternoon for 4 weeks. So it was exhausting and challenging, but so amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I watched some of your sketches online today, and I actually laughed, which I can't, which means they must have been really funny because I struggle with sketches.
Oh, really? Oh, well, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
I watched the one about the Green Party.
Oh, yeah.
That was that one in particular.
Yeah.
That really made me laugh, which was inappropriate because I was pretending to be working in the office, but that's fine.
Oh, not safe for work.
But sorry, that was a digression.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I watched those, and it's like I thought, oh yeah, this is funny. This has made me laugh. And presumably, all online sketch things are supposed to do this, but they don't.
Oh,
I don't know why not.
There you go. Yes. So
sorry,
the
yeah.
clique.
Yes.
Yes. So, yeah, basically, I really enjoyed working with the people that I met there, but we were from all over the world. There were a few people from the States, but from different parts of the States. There was a guy from Venezuela, a guy from Australia. So, yeah, we wanted to work together again, and we decided that the way we would do that would be to do the Edinburgh Fringe.
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
Yeah, do a show there. So the clique was what we came up with, because there was a kind of it's an in joke, I'm afraid, because the Americans pronounce the word clique as click.
Yes.
And so we spelt it CLEEK so that Americans would pronounce it right. Yeah.
Yes, nice.
And yeah, so again, the kind of there are a couple of experimental aspects to this. One of them
I'm
was
surprised.
no.
Really experimental aspects. Ooh.
Yeah.
Who'd have guessed?
Who would have guessed? So one of them was in the format, which was half sketch and half improv.
Oh.
And the way we did that was by having a member of the audience who we would, at the beginning of the show, pick as our queen bee. And they had a little inflatable crown that they would put on.
Nice.
And so then it was their job to set the order of the show. So we had a little bucket with cards on, and on each card was written either the title of a sketch that we'd pre-written and rehearsed, or the name of an improv game.
Right.
And so the queen bee would pick out a card, read out what was on it, and then we would either all shout improv and then explain the game and do the game,
Yes.
or shout sketch and then get into position and perform the sketch. So it was different every time because they would be picking them out in a different order.
And was there more stuff in the bucket than there was time to perform?
No, it actually worked out. The timing worked out pretty well. It was always about 55 minutes, which was what we needed it to be.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was...
I was just wondering, if there was more material in the bucket than there was time to perform, in theory you could have through random, you could have an entire set that was all sketch or all improv. But,
yeah, in theory, yeah. But no, we wanted it to be a kind of balance of both. Right. So yeah, so we had about 30, maybe 25 minutes worth of sketch material, and we knew the rest would be improv. Yeah. So that was one aspect that was experimental, was mixing the two forms and how to make that work in a show.
How did you make that work in the show?
Well, in that format, basically, having
Right.
the somebody read it out rather than us decide, oh, it's going to be this order.
Yes.
We're going to do this sketch, then this game, then this sketch, then that game.
Right.
Having it interactive and have the audience kind of involved in that.
Yes.
So that was one experimental aspect. And the other was, how do we actually rehearse when we all live around the world?
Yes.
So we actually did that over Skype. We had,
really?
Yeah, we had Skype group chats.
Wow.
Which would be partly admin, figuring out, because we
Yeah.
crowdfunded as well. So it was like talking about the crowdfunding and making sure we'd booked accommodation, kind of admin bits. But then we'd also talk about the sketches that we'd written, and we'd kind of rehearse them a bit over Skype. So it was a really international collaboration, basically.
That's really
and then
cool.
we all came together in Edinburgh. I think everyone had got there by the day before, so we had a little bit of time in the flat to block things out as well.
Wow, that's really amazing. That's wow,
Yeah.
amazing. What a world we live in today.
I know,
Such
isn't
things
it?
are possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. As I say, I don't know. I love improv, and I think my expectations for sketch are just much higher because you think with improv, well, they're just making it up. So if it's funny or moving, then it's great. But with sketch, I think, well, you've written this down.
Yeah.
This is the
and
best.
rehearsed it.
Yes.
And had someone else look over it probably
Yes.
and add a few jokes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's me rather than sketch.
Yeah.
It's me.
I think that is why we were, sort of not worried, but why we were interested to see if you could mix them, because you are going to have a higher hit rate of laughs in a sketch, hopefully. if it's well written, you are going to have that just because of the process of creating it compared to an improv scene. So that's why we were interested to see if they could be mixed. But it worked really well. I think because we did short form games, that's got more of a kind of sketchy kind of feel, and you've got more of a chance of, it's funny just seeing somebody try and do something difficult. So, when it goes wrong, that's funny for people as well. So you have got those kind of extra laughs as well as if we happen to hit on a funny line or a funny character as well. So there's a little bit more of a chance of it kind of, it's got the same kind of, the kind of feel of a fast-paced sketch show, I think. Whereas if we'd have tried to mix sketches with long-form improv, I think that's maybe a bit more difficult, and maybe that's another experiment that needs to be done.
I can see how sketches and short form would be a more natural fit, and you're also with short form, you're keeping the energy up, and it's all cool. So you doing much sketch stuff at the moment?
No, I'm not actually.
Oh,
I had to think for a moment. No.
You're too busy doing improv.
Yeah, focusing a lot on improv right now. I'm finding a lot of joy in it. So
Brilliant.
you have to follow the joy, don't you?
Yes, I think that sounds either follow the money or follow the joy. And frankly, there's a lot more joy in improv than there is money. Cool. And I've also on my list of my Lizzy list, I also have multi-story.
Oh yes, yeah. That was the first team I belonged to in London.
Oh, right.
Actually, yeah, and that was a long form team. I joined that pretty soon after I was at drama school. So it must have been 2009, I think, maybe 2010. And that was theatrical. Emotionally grounded sort of. Style of play, and actually that's where I met Amy Cook Hodgson and Graham Dixon, who then went on to set up Ostentatious.
Right.
So yeah.
Do you ever watch Ostentatious and go, "It should have been me"?
No. I love what they do, but it's
not experimental enough.
I know.
It's like Jane Austen. How much more mainstream can you get than that?
No, I love what they do, but it just doesn't feel. I don't feel drawn to doing it myself.
No, fair enough.
No, but that was my first introduction into the London improv scene. I had done improv before in Cambridge, and before that, years and years ago, as a teenager in Lancaster. But yeah, Multi-Story was the first group that I was involved in London. And one of the people who ran that, actually, Mark Phoenix, he does a thing now called, I think it's called Third Person Theatre, which is again carrying on with that kind of theatrical improv, dramatic improv kind of style. So yeah, lots of really interesting things came out of that group, even though the group itself is not still going. So yeah.
Cool. So you're not only improvising, you're also coaching.
Yes.
Tell me about your coaching.
Yeah. This is a project I'm really excited about. It's called Charm and Strange, and I'm doing that with Sophie Pumphrey of Big Now and Somewhat Theatre. Again, inspired. We'd wanted to teach or coach together for a while, and it was when we did Dave Rosowski's week in November last year that was kind of the final inspiration for us to set something up. So we auditioned for people who would be interested in doing that kind of organic improv, more patient, sort of more present kind of way of working. We auditioned in January, and we've just been going since then, really. We're probably going to set up another team, but we don't have dates for that yet. We're both really loving that, and it's it's experimental. The first 10 weeks that we did particularly were experimental for us as coaches and teachers, because we love the work that Dave Rosowski does, but he has a very unique way of teaching and of getting that out of people. And we wanted to kind of explore and discover ways that we could find our way of coaching that style, and how can we get the same quality of improv that's patient and grounded and present and mindful and truthful. How can we, Lizzy, Mace and Sophie Pumphrey, do that? So it was really, we used some of the things that Dave has done, and especially some of the concepts he has, like about the balloon blowing up. But we've also mixed it with other exercises we've done with other teachers. Like we both did the week intensive with Susan Messing and Rachel Mason a couple of years ago. She's also done work with Dummy before. We've both worked with Patty Styles. So we're kind of drawing on different aspects of those, but in our own unique ways. And we're also both really interested in mindfulness in general, and that kind of how to be more present, and you know, or how to be present more often. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
That's a good way of putting it.
And how to practice that, and how to notice what our bodies are telling us, and what our emotions are telling us, and how to notice what's happened in a scene and when we've been changed by something. And we're just loving exploring that in all different ways with the team, and the people we have in the team are great, as they're absolutely wonderful, and they've all really come on board with that as well. And it feels like the sessions that I've run with Charm and Strange have felt very collaborative. You know, I feel like I want to empower people to discover these things for themselves, and discover new things that even, you know, other people haven't discovered, you know. So it's kind of, it feels very collaborative, and that everyone's coming in with things that they've learned in life, and, you know, therapy, and and relationships, and just, you know, learning about how we can be more human on stage. Because I think that's like I think that's kind of the, you know, if we're talking about noble goals, I think as performers, it's kind of our job to remind the audience how to be human. Because I think modern society kind of takes a lot of that, like, looks down on emotions. You know, you're not supposed to show emotions. You're not supposed to be guided by your emotions. You're supposed to be logical, especially in sort of English culture, and I think especially for men as well. And not to be playful and to be serious and, you know, kind of just confined and restricted and stifled. And I feel like in theatre, if we as performers can be the opposite of all that, if we can be free and emotional and vulnerable and truthful, then we can remind people in the audience how to be a human. And how to get more connected with each other, and with ourselves, which is really lacking a lot in education, the way our education system works, in the way our work system works, the way capitalism works, the way consumerism works. We're all disconnected from the truth of ourselves. So yeah, that's the noble cause, I suppose.
That's brilliant. No, that's a really good thing to aim for. I mean, it's a high standard, but it's worth aiming.
Yeah.
Aiming for high target. It's a high target, but it's worth aiming for.
Yeah. I don't know. Is it a high target? It feels a very. To me, it feels a very sort of a target that's very close to me. So it doesn't feel far away. It feels if I can practice this more, then in that way I'm even sort of demonstrating just in life how to be more connected and more truthful. And you never know what little impact you have on the people you interact with every day. Just, you know, someone you're buying your coffee from, or someone next to you in a bus stop. You know, you can interact with people in a way that touches them and opens them up. And so in that way, it's not a difficult out of reach goal. It's something that we can do in little ways all the time. So yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's a natural conclusion. I have another question, which I normally end on. What is the signature Lizzy Mace move when you're performing? What's
my signature move?
What do you do that people go, classic Mace? She always does that. It might save the day. It might.
God, I don't know. I really don't know. I can't think.
It's alright if you don't, because that last part was a really good natural end. So anything after this is a bonus, but we'll just pretend it hasn't happened if you don't think of anything. The thing is, okay, there's two reasons why I asked this. One is that listeners can adopt or adapt your signature move. And also, they will then spot you doing it. So it will force you to develop new signature moves. So it'll help the listeners and you as a performer.
Yeah. I really can't think of something that I do. I mean, I suppose I have a signature object work move.
Brilliant. Tell me about that.
It's probably having a cup of tea. Yeah, if I'm sitting down and reach out, it will quite often be a cup of tea. Or even if I'm standing up, chatting to someone, you know, standing in a doorway or something, it might be
And why is that?
I suppose it's probably just because I do it a lot in my normal life. I drink a lot of tea. Yeah, probably. And it's nice to just, you know, I mean, object work is great for creating a visual world, you know. And so the cup of tea, it's also just a starting point for something else, because then you have to have something to put the tea on, and there might be something next to the tea. Yes. And, you know, you might have to add some sugar, so then you've got the sugar bowl, and, you know, what do they look like? So that then influences what kind of room you might be in, if it's a fancy schmancy sugar bowl, or, you know, if it's just the packet of sugar, like, without being tipped into a bowl, you know. It's a way of, any object work really is just a way of opening up your visual imagination and expanding the world that you're in. So yeah, I suppose it's a nice starting point for whatever that might be.
Lovely. Hey, that's brilliant. You see? That's really good, because actually that's an insight into why I always knew object work was important, but it hadn't occurred to me why it was important, or not in that way that, this cup leads to that sugar that leads to, and it's a way of getting into the character and the situation. That's lovely. I think that's everything.
Aww.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I made this.
That's improv!